Hello there, this is Mr. Dunaway. Welcome to our flipped lesson over words and expressions and order of operations. If you have not yet done so, the first thing we always do when we take notes is put on the name, date, and the hour that we have math. This is really important, particularly your name and date, so that we can keep our notes in order. We need to work through some vocabulary words. The first one is numerical expression. A numerical expression is a combination of numbers and operations, such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Examples could be 3 plus 2, or maybe 5 times 10. So any set of numbers with math operations, that's a numerical expression. Notice I don't have the answer. I didn't say 3 plus 2 is 5. That's actually the next word. When we ask you to find the answer, that means to evaluate. See what it says? Evaluate means to find the numerical value of an expression. So evaluated would be 3 plus 2. You would go ahead and say equals 5. So that's evaluated. Evaluate. And I'm just about off my screen there. You can see it. Okay, 3 plus 2 is 5. If you're asked to evaluate that, you would say 5. The third phrase here, this is actually 3 words here. This is order of operations. And I made that line a little short for you, didn't I? The order of operations is the order with which we always evaluate math problems. And this is a critical thing that we learn now, and we get really good at it because we have to do it. Basically, in everything we do this year, we will always follow the order of operations. If we don't do that, we could all end up with different answers. So we're going to spend some time talking about the order of operations at the bottom of the screen, or the bottom of your paper. We're now going to talk about the order as far as what do you do first. Okay, so we're just going to talk first, second, third, fourth. You've probably heard a phrase called PEMDAS, and we're going to explain what that means here if you don't know it. The first thing that you always do is solve the parentheses. Okay, simplify what is inside the grouping symbols. Now this is really important that you remember we're talking about what's inside the parentheses. I'm not talking about if two parentheses are touching each other. I'm talking about what is inside. So if you have something inside parentheses here, you always do that first. The inside part of a parentheses. Okay. If you don't have parentheses, or you've already solved all the parentheses, the next thing you do is you solve the exponents. Okay, and that's to solve any exponent value. If you don't recall what an exponent is, here's an example. An exponent is that little number up there on top. And that means you multiply the base times itself 2 times. So this would be 3 times 3. And that actually equals 9. If you have, say, 4 to the power of 2, that means 4 times itself 2 times, which would be 16. There's 2 examples of exponents. Okay, if you do not have any exponents after you've checked for parentheses or exponents, then you multiply and divide. All right, now here's an important point. Why might I have both of them there? This has often been taught wrong in early levels of math. You do not always multiply before you divide. Some people have actually taught that way. No, that's not the case. You evaluate multiplication and division from, important point here because I'm going to test you on this, left to right. Okay, so that would mean if I had, let's say, 9 divided by 3 times 4, just written just like that without parentheses, you would do this first. You would do 9 divided by 3 first. And then you would do times 4. You go left to right if there's no parentheses telling you to do otherwise. Star that, make a mental note because you're going to check it, and some of us are going to mess up on it because we've probably been taught wrong at some point in our life. Moving on down to the last part. If all of this is done, if you've got all the parentheses done, you've got all the exponents done, you've multiplied and divided left to right, and then at that point, if you still have addition or subtraction, you add and subtract. Evaluate addition and subtraction. The same rule applies, left to right. Okay, and that's the order that we go. We always have to follow that order. So what used to happen is when I first began teaching this a long time ago, we would have this word PEMDAS, and we would write it like this, and that would be our order: parenthesis, exponent, multiply, divide, add, subtract. But the more I taught it, the more I realized people were making mistakes right here, always multiplying before dividing. And we talked that's not always going to be the case. So we no longer write PEMDAS like this. Now I write PEMDAS this way. And I put multiply, divide on the same line, add, subtract on the same line, meaning those two things have equivalent value in the order of operations, as well as adding and subtracting has equivalent value in the order of operation. So this is a summary of the material in this particular section, and here's some examples of types of questions I'm going to ask you to work on today. First of all, let's look at the instructions. This is on the back of your notes. It says, write a numerical expression for each verbal phrase. Number 1 says the cost of 6 electronic handheld games if each costs $8. Well, you're probably smart enough and you can figure out that, if we figured out all of that, it would be 8 times 6, and so the answer would be 48. But notice they didn't ask me to evaluate. They asked for a numerical expression. So if they ask you for a numerical expression, from the first very part of our notes right here, we learned that a numerical expression is just like a math equation. Or a math expression, really. It's not really an equation, but we'll get into that. It's an expression. So you would just simply write 6 times 8. Now, if you do not recall, at this level of math, we no longer use an X for multiplication. We use a dot, or we use parentheses. So this is actually the answer to number 1, 6 times 8. Number 2, it says the cost of 1 box of cereal if 4 boxes cost $12. Well, that's a trickier one. If you know that 4 boxes is 12 and they're asking you for 1, what you have to do here is you'd have to divide 12 divided by 4 to find the cost of 1 box of cereal. And since they're only asking me for a numerical expression, we don't have to answer that. We could. We know we could figure out that it's actually $3 per box, but the numerical expression is written 12 divided by 4. So please be aware of the instructions of the homework if that's what you're asked to do. All right, moving on to now actually evaluating, which they do in this part, the second part of our notes. It says evaluate each expression. Now they want us to work this problem until we get down to one number if we can. And in all of these questions, we are able to do that. So here we are using, over here would be a good thing to write down that PEMDAS. This is the order of operations work for you. And I would like you doing this homework as much as you can without a calculator. And what is really important in this particular part of our class is that you show all steps. I have not decided if I'm going to allow you to use a calculator because I want to see every step, and I want you to follow writing it on your paper exactly like I do here in number 1. Or I'm sorry, I guess number 3. It's our first order of operations, but it's number 3 on this side. 18 plus 2 times 4. So I have to look over here. I don't have a parenthesis and I don't have an exponent, but I do have multiplication. So the multiplication is first. So I'm going to put this little symbol right here, and that's telling me I did that first. 18 has to wait. So I just did that little arrow. I would like to see that on your paper exactly like I'm doing down the page. It's important we do our math at this level working down the page. All right, the next one is 18 plus 8. That's all that's left, so we can go ahead, add that together, and get 26. All right, when I do my videos, I try to keep them at time increments of about 10 minutes, which is where I am right now. So I'm going to stop this, and I'm going to start another video beginning at this point. But here's what I'd like to ask you to do. Before you start the next video, why don't you, with a pencil, go ahead and try number 4, and the reason I'd like you to use a pencil here is in case you mess up, you can erase it. Go ahead and try number 4, and I'll come back with our part 2 video to work through the rest of these questions.